now we're going to have Thibaud and Euan join us from. They're working on Lower Thames Crossing and the delivery of that, and I think it's a very good example again of collaboration in a different way across different parties, partly because they're a joint venture. And honestly, and you'll see what I mean in a second, they blow my mind every single time I see their projects. So I'm really looking forward to seeing to having them share their experience with you. And with that, I'm adding you onto the stage. And um, thank you both for joining. And thanks for engaging so far as well. I will convince you that Morta charts are better. um, but I mean, we'll see what you've done in a second, and I think people will also see why you're asking all of these questions.
Thank you, Mo. Before the internet trolls start to come in, we do use Morta charts as well, and we like them. But then the reason why we're asking that question is because we want to, yeah, it is something we think about and scratch our heads and make sure we have the right approach. I forgot I have a super wide screen, so you'll see some black part on each side of my screen, so apologies for that. So as Mo said, today we're going to talk about the Low Thames Crossing project. So different approach. We're not talking about a company-wide implementation. We were just working on one project, but there's aspects of it that will probably resonate with what happened already. So the idea for today will be to talk about, of course, why we're using Morta on Low Thames Crossing, but also how we've laid the foundations together with Euan, and then how from those foundations we're now expanding and improving our use of Morta, our use of different use cases, how we organize our information, and we'll finish the presentation with maybe a bit of a now what, a bit of now that we've done all these things, what's our next steps. So you could see with Mo's, we share something with Euan, which is weird first names. So mine is French, Euan is Welsh, and this is not a Six Nation game, but we've kind of coming together for once to deliver this project. So I'm Thibaud. I've been mostly working in the UK actually on previous big infrastructure projects. I'll let Euan introduce himself.
Euan Evans, I work for Arup, part of the design JV for this project, and I work on a lot of our major transport projects within the UK.
All right, so we can't really talk about Low Thames Crossing without talking about the Dartford Crossing, unfortunately. I'll do the short version, and yes, I know there's a typo. It's not $200 million, it's 200 million pounds. So the Dartford Crossing today has 50 million crossing a year, and the volumes are increasing. It is known to be something that is not quite working as it should be. I'm not going to go into all of the stats and all of the details. Low Thames Crossing as a project is very good at telling the Dartford Crossing is bad because that justifies the projects altogether. So you can read on that side by yourself, but really the purpose of the Low Thames Crossing ultimately is to release the current strains that happen on the Dartford Crossing with the opportunity to build a new highway. So it will be a 70 miles per hour highway with multiple vehicle types. It will span across the Thames, so create that new crossing from the Thames east of London. Will nearly double the capacity with those 3 lanes connections. We will also have so the traffic in Dartford will also be reduced by 20%. So long story short, the Low Thames Crossing will be, let's say, something that has been needed for a while, that has been highly political. We're not going to go into that today, but the message is we are delivering that project currently, and we're trying our best to deliver it in the right way. The project itself is split into 3 sections. So with the southern section where Skanska is delivering the works, we have the northern section where Balfour BT is also busy delivering the works. So we're connecting to the A2M2 at the south and connecting all the way up to the 35 in the north. Our section is the tunnel and approaches section. where the Bouygues JV is currently working. So we have our partners on the project. Of course, we have a client, Low Thames Crossing, which is backed up by National Highways. So our ultimate client is National Highways. Low Thames Crossing is supported by Jacobs, Covey, and Arcadis, our technical partners. We are Bouygues Travaux Publics and Murphy joint venture, and as Euan said, our designers are Arup, Mott, MacDonald, but also Bouygues TP, because as a contractor, we also like to design our own tunnels. That may sound weird to some of you, but the designing tunnels is quite intertwined with the way we build them. So typically our own technical department is also designing the tunnel. The scope of what we're trying to do on this project, so we're in the preliminary phase, we're not fully on site yet, but we will do a 4.2 kilometer long twin bore tunnel. We're talking big diameter, 15 plus meters with 3 lanes of traffic in each tunnel, so quite a chunky tunnel. Cross passages along the way. Of course, at the north and the south, portal structures that will host buildings used to maintain the actual road once the road will be operational. And one particularity is that our contract is really a multidisciplinary contract, so we are dealing with everything. We're doing the landscaping, tunnel, civil works, the road itself, all the systems and everything. So it's really a very rich project in that sense. Now the kind of onto Mortar. So this image was also generated by AI. Of course, you'll see a few in the presentation, but we kind of recognize starting Low Thames Crossing, similar to what SES was saying. There's that kind of gap that exists in the industry between some people pushing forward and going beyond, basically in terms of data lakehouse and warehouse and AI and drone and all the things you're meant to say, like someone like me, to just justify why you're here. But the reality on site, the reality, the day-to-day life of people is that Excel is still very present. And there's this kind of gap in the middle between those super system we use and between the no system. And we've seen Morta as a way to bridge that gap in the middle. So why we've chosen Morta on Low Thames Crossing for many different things, but I guess those 3 first points are it does work from the get-go. So again, we're a project, we're a joint venture with 2 joint ventures actually. It is useful to have systems that are plug and play, that we don't have to rely on heavy IT involvement, spend 6 months making sure we have a data warehouse in place, we have an analyst in place and all of these things. And then we start connecting to all of the systems. And we've done all these things in the past. But what we've appreciated with Morta is plug and play. We start with delivering value from the get-go. And even though moving forward, we might go into that more advanced analytics space, there's still a place for Morta as a quick, easy to use tool for people to access the information, access the data, and impact the information. Of course, the system is open by nature, and that's something we value a lot. I'm sure Ali and the rest of the team will tell you we're quite keen API users of Morta to do many different things. But the fact that the system is open is really something we value, and we try to use whenever we select a system now. We really value that as a key factor of choice. The last point really for us is also a very fundamental reason why we've chosen Morta. So I come from another major project called High Speed 2, and on that project we had something called the South Portal. The South Portal, what is the South Portal, was my favorite question on the project, because when you ask that question to different teams, different departments, you always had a different answer. And I think as an industry, whether you're building bridges or tunnels or even buildings, it's really hard for people to agree on what they're talking about and to refer to them in the same way. So, well, the choice of Morta was motivated by that willingness to standardize the way we talk about things, basically. So, how do we refer to those things so that we don't rename or refer to the same thing over and over again in a different way? I'll leave the floor to Euan, who will explain where we started together. So yeah, the approach we've had on Low Thames Crossing, and the reason why Euan is also presenting with me today, is we really worked together from the get-go. We all had admin rights on the system, and we really tried to build the system together. Really, that's been the fundamental principle we've tried to follow through.
Hi all. So before we implemented Motor, we had to bear the users in mind. So it's the project users, and we got hundreds of them on this project that would start to engage with the system. So to get them moving out of this Excel world, we needed to put good practice in place of how can this be simple, how could the change management from the Excel into this online platform tool be seamless as possible, but also allow us to get feedback to improve on. So some of the key things between us that we highlighted we needed to sort out was ensuring we had project-wide column header colors. Sounds simple, but it presents in a consistent way to the user. Put in consistent rag colors, so when we're doing validation stuff, things are being showed consistently across documents, tables, views, etc. Looking at how we categorize everything, how do we group everything, how do we name our tables, documents, and views, etc. So when people do start engaging with it, they have consistency and they know how to access and reach these different documents, etc. And then the key bit then was how to navigate. When people first land in Motor, how do they navigate to these various documents, tables, etc.? So on this piece here, as you can see, there's some kind of question marks on some of these things, but we have developed more of a tile-based navigation on the landing page for the users, which is more of then a pointer to reach the relevant information that they need to do. Something that hopefully we can work with Motor to develop, so it's more of a by default is available. So next page. So we then looked at, right, let's start small, but with a big aim in mind. And one of the first things that we needed to get in place was a information delivery plan. So TIDPs, MIDPs. But then from that, what did we want to achieve with that? So we wanted that MIDP then to start connecting to our CDE systems and potentially other systems. So looking at what other processes would this MIDP need to be connecting in. And then from that, how would we iterate? How would we keep improving and start to develop and advance the processes we're putting in place to start connecting to a lot more processes, systems, etc. So the overall approach, I'm sure most of you are aware with the MIDP and stuff like that, but we've got the AMJ approach, so the designers, TIDPs, which we needed to manage and organize. We've then got the BMJ, so Bouygues Murphy JV, so on the contractor side, with the various TIDPs, etc., within that organization. And then also we had the supply chain, and there'll be many supply chain coming on board during the project. So ensuring we have a processes and a setup in place that we can manage all of these, and also manage how we manage the views, etc., and permissions, so people only access what they need to access. Then on top of that, the P6 part of how that connects. So from that, then we looked at how would we put it in place with the architecture. So we have a lot of information standards driving the MIDP. So we have the relevant ISO 19650 in terms of naming conventions, etc. But we also have well-defined standards from our client, both national highways and from Lower Thames Crossing. So the first part was looking at how do we set up the tables and the views, etc., within Motor, so it becomes a single source of truth. And then looking at what are the CD systems we have in place. So on this project, we have project-wise and we have A-site. Project-wise from the design perspective, and then A-site from the contractor perspective. On top of that, the key thing within the MIDP is the P6, and P6 is the program. So how do we track, plan, scope out everything we're delivering and put in time frames, stamps, etc. So this is very important on these large transport projects, and currently there's two programs being delivered, one from the contractor and one from the designers. So currently we've got a process in place where This system sits in the CDE, gets QA reviewed, and then from that we are syncing this back into Motor to allow us to start connecting it within the MITP architecture. Next. And then going forward, although currently we are managing this within our CD systems to then sync into Motor, we are looking at potentially developing APIs so that we are making it more of a live iterative thing and pushing directly from the P6 itself, rather than going through an export and doing the workflow QA processes within CD systems.
Maybe just adding one thing to what Euan described, our approach with the MIDP has been different to what we've seen in other projects. We use Morta to create deliverables in our system. You cannot create a deliverable in a site or project-wise unless you go through Morta. So it's the entry point to everything, and it's our key to maintain that source of truth. Go ahead.
Yeah. So then it's coming back down to this user experience. And like Thibaud was saying there, this is our source of truth of where everything gets created, where previously users would have been used to going into project-wise, creating their information and then managing in there, or the TIDP would have been something done in an Excel file, which becomes more of just a contractual deliverable rather than being something that's useful that we can use on the project. So by implementing this, for the users, then we developed a document that's simple to go in and structured in a way where they can access their design deliverables. A section of how do they create their deliverables. So when creating and populating the TIDP, we have a process in place then that triggers an action of, now we've planned our deliverables, now go and create them in the relevant CD systems. And because we do have two systems in place, previously this would have been really tricky to kind of manage the duplication of documents, naming, etc. Morta is allowing us to ensure that there's no duplicate information in two different systems. If the document code has been taken in the one system, then it's the next available code that goes into the A-site system. And then based on your user profile, this will dictate on where these documents get created. So the user interface for them to go, we've broken them into four kind of simple sections where review the deliverables, create your deliverables. Then there's more of an admin document control place of how people can review and update if things have gone wrong. So we can track things, if there's errors and stuff being brought up within the tool, we can then manage all of that. And within also the TIDP, then we got statuses. So on the bottom image is trying to show on the left the color coded, the RAG system in terms of when something's been actioned, when something's been created, when something's been updated, or if something already exists or something's gone wrong in a process when creating or updating. Okay, once the MIDPs, TIDPs were up and running, we then looked at, right, what next could we do within the systems? So we took the level of information need as the next logical step, or for our project, we refer to this as our project component catalog, where the task here was looking at how we take the information standards from the client and from the industry as well, such as BSDD, the national highways, lower Thames crossing, we got carbon requirements, we got the Uniclass codes, etc. And how do we then put a structure in place of how we name everything we deliver within our various CAD BIM platforms, whatever you want to call them. So from that, we were able to, within Motor, ingest all these information standards into the systems. We could put a process in place on how the naming standards for these components were done. So every discipline needed to go into Motor and create all their component catalog. And then the level of information need comes into, we can then start linking these components to the asset requirements, to the carbon requirements, to Uniclass codes, etc. So not only are we capturing geometrical information in there, but also the alphanumerical information and the documentation. So how are we going to be delivering this information as well to the client? Yes. So from that, then once that was done, so we've done the create bit. So we have that one single source of truth, again being motor. We then looked at, okay, now we've created this. What do we want to do with it next? We want this system database to actually now drive the software that we have. So we're looking at how do we automate from the component catalog or the level of information need into our software. So we looked at how do we automate and then configure the various software platforms we're on. We show in the three main ones we have there, but then how then we deliver. So from Motor, the source of truth, we've been able to automate, configure, and then deliver, which are IFC 4x3 files, which are conforming to standards and are all being controlled by what we've done within the Motor system. So any updates we do in Motor, any new standards that come in place, we update, we relink, and we push back into the software platforms to deliver into the IFC format. And then once we've had everything structured, we can then start looking at the carbon reporting. How do we QA, manage, review, validate all the components we are delivering? How are we doing and tracking our deliverables based on the program codes, the task information delivery plans, etc. And this is coming back to that various part of then some are in Power BI, some are in the Motor charts, etc. But with all this structured data, we can now really start pushing on to bigger and better things.
All right. So yeah, as Euan explained, the key factor for us was start on good foundations. That's what we've learned the hard way on other projects as well. If we don't do that first, if we don't make the effort to make sure the design is done correctly, our information is managed, then it's really hard to do any other thing. So we really tried to do that first before we started to do anything else. But then once our information became structured, the key one we think was one of the key enabler and one of our key fundamental of the way we've approached Morta was to kind of try and free the program. So we all use different programming tool in infrastructure. Typically, Primavera P6 is kind of the de facto standards, and it's a very good tool to do what it's meant to be doing. But when it comes to sharing that information, extracting that information, it's always challenging. The planning team always has all these questions that are being asked to them specifically. That takes a lot of time from them. That they have less time to actually focus on maintaining the program, interacting with the production team, interacting with the different stakeholders. So the idea really for us was to use Morta as a way to free the program, as a way to extract the information out of the program. And we've actually seen a very good upkeep. Our planning team is really one of our biggest users of Morta, because it allows them to stop using, because okay, the P6 database is amazing, but when it comes to creating little reports to reorganize the information, to, for example, check what's our deliverable submittal dates, when do we start our consent process, because that's where we are on the project. Where is there an impact on the consenting process? When do we start our tendering? Do we know we're in time or late for that tendering process? When do we actually start the works on site? These type of dates, they always end up being used by everyone. Everyone wants to know the answers to those questions. And the reality is usually people either extracting information from the program, doing copy pasting, or at best what we've seen is, in VLOOKUP of extract and all this stuff. So doing it in Morta allows us to centralize the information in one place, manage the information so people can access that, but also can add to it. And I think that was one of the comments that came back on the previous presentation is, okay, we can read P6 through an API and plug that into Power BI. But what Morta allows the planning team to do is to organize the information a bit better, reorganize, filter, add some added value to that raw data so that they can generate things like program on the page, they can generate things like milestone visualizations. And to some degree, some of this is actually done in Power BI, but then Morta is kind of the link, the binding element in the middle that allows let's say the mega database in P6 and the end product to work together. So we really focused on that approach, and then we think that we're at that stage now. So once we freed the program, the idea was really to start building bring back bricks. So this list is not exhaustive, but it's just a way to show that on any project, but on our big infrastructure project, we have many teams doing many different things. The scale is quite big, so people can tend to get lost into different aspects. So we, even ourselves, when we started using Morta and we saw the potential initially, we thought, oh, let's do everything with Morta. But then quickly went back with that brick by brick approach. So we're trying to add bricks and bricks and bricks. So the one thing we started, we had a strong program, strong MIDP in place. Okay, let's start looking at the consent, because consent is the key, one of the key things that can, derail or not the project at the stage we are at the moment. And what was very interesting with the consent team, and it's applicable to any other team we started liaising with, we started with, oh, can we have the consent register in Morta, please? Okay, fine. Our team worked with the consent team to get the register in Morta. But having the register in Morta is nothing better than having it in Excel, right? It's just a register. So what Morta allowed us to do is to also explain, engage with the people that actually using our CDE, the register could become a tracker, because by using the system and having made the efforts initially with that register, then people could see live updates of that plan versus actual, really. And that has been a very good tool that we've used. Morta has been a very good tool to push people towards the CD, push people towards a more controlled way of managing their information. And somehow, somewhere along the way, they started using it for themselves and they started seeing the value in using the CD, whereas on previous projects, there's always pushbacks about doc control this, doc control that, da 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 da. I think where we've really seen the difference here is the it wasn't they didn't realize they were doing it, but they ended up doing it themselves, if that makes sense. Because logically they went through the process and realized that okay, if actually we manage our consents in our CD, we'll be able to track actual dates, actual status, where we are. And instead of having a full team of tracking everything manually, everything is automated, everything is flowing. And that principle kind of applied to many other things. So we've been working with our procurement team as well to manage some of the tendering we're doing at the moment. As you can see, we do use charts in Morta. We use charts in Morta mostly when the data is in Morta only, and there's no additional needs for any outside data, because the value of having it in Morta makes it live, makes it quickly accessible, and there's no need for Power BI in that situation, because we're working at project level, we're working on live information, and then the procurement team can see real time what's going on with their with the procurement process. We added more bricks, and then we started doing the temporary works packaging, and so on and so on and so on. So we really, I think the approach we're trying to apply with Morta as a whole, and it kind of resonate with that carbon project and the fact that Low Thames Crossing as a project has that, it's a carbon mindset. We're really trying to recycle and reuse as much as possible. And so it's really that notion of when something gets defined once in Morta, it's defined once, and then we reuse it across everything. So you refer to spatial locations, fine, there's a list for that. You refer to activities on site, there's a list for that. You refer to, I don't know, plant, equipment, people, and so on. So we're really trying to build that kind of, it's the master data management of the poor, if you could put it like that, right? So it's the same principle of managing that data essentially and knowing that people are referring to the right information. And that for us really unlocks lots of different use cases, because we're constantly reusing the same information. We're not reinventing the wheel all the time. So we wanted to do live demo initially, but realized that it was going to be a bit tight because there's too many things to look at and too many things to show. I guess where we are, so we've been using Morta for a bit more than a year now. So it's been a journey to get where we are today. And one thing that was raised in the previous presentation as well, where what we wanted to do from the get-go was to set up those kind of digital champions to get more accountability within the business, within the different teams actually using Morta. And what we see a lot of as well is you interact with people, you try to find solutions with their problems. And the best example that I'm sure happened to many of the attendees here is you've done your things, you've done your Power BI, you've done you've solved the problem, right? And then a week later, someone tells you, well, we've gone back to Excel because I really wanted the chart to be in pink, or, I wanted to have like that. I wanted to make it my own. And the ownership for us is where the value of Morta relies. People have ownership of what they're doing. They can create their own views, they can organize their information. So that's a key factor for us. And also, if we're trying to replace Excel, we can't say to people stop using Excel, but at the same time, you're not going to use Morta. Someone else is going to use it for you. So that notion of builders, now we're developing that community throughout the project of people who are being trained on Morta more effectively, who will have the, let's say, the ability to do more in the system, because that's where we want to be. We want to make sure that the value is provided by the teams for their teams, and we as the central digital team are here to make sure that the whole ecosystem is working. But to some degree, we're taking a back foot and we're leaving the teams doing what they have to do, because that's really where we want to be. We want to be in a situation where the procurement team is doing something that's useful for the procurement team, carbon team is doing something useful for the carbon team, and so on and so on. And the key factor is they're all doing things in their own world, but in an environment where we have shared standards, shared ownership, shared concepts, so that not everyone works in their silo. We're reusing each other's information rather than reinventing it across different functions.
So looking at, should it be Mortar or not? So we kind of highlighted 5 kind of key things here. Is it a new data set? Is it going to be interacting with other data sets? Or is it just an isolated piece of work? How is it being shared? Is it an internal? Do people need to interact with it internally, externally? And how many people interact? Does it need to be managed in terms of permission management, and limiting certain things to different people? And how are we tracking it? So if all of these are being ticked, except for if it's an existing data set, we also looking at, should that be coming in, then it should definitely be in Mortar. So that's the kind of approach we're taking with current stuff that we're doing on the projects, and when we're engaging with users of, right, let's go through these kind of questions, and then we decide if it goes into Mortar or not.
So kind of to finalize the presentation and reflect on where we've been so far, it's been an interesting one because Morta is sold as a no-code solution, but I guess maybe it's just our use of it, where we do actually use quite a bit of code to use Morta and to actually manage it. But I guess that's where we want to be. We want to be in that no-code environment for the end user, but having the ability for ourselves to go a bit beyond that if we need to. One thing we've also lived was initially we approached Morta as a database. And there's a few use cases where, okay, we're going to structure our information, and there'll be tables, and there'll be reference to those tables and all that good stuff. But then the UI aspect comes into play, and we're really reflecting on whether Morta is really a database or not. And I think what's tricky sometimes is Morta sits at the really between the application and the database. Which is good on some level, but sometimes makes it a bit weird because you would like to have the super database infrastructure in the background to make sure data is correct, but people need to interact with that data in an efficient way. So sometimes interacting with the data via a table is not always the best way to do it. One thing we've lived, and I think that was also shown in the previous presentation, the flexibility of Morta is amazing, but it's very, very easy to start creating monsters and things that are not meant to happen if you were to do it maybe in SQL Server, but can happen in Morta. And I think it really requires a high level of organization, vision, because otherwise it's very quick that any system can turn into monsters. And I think we've seen Morta can definitely turn into a monster very quickly. And then I guess this notion of openness, right? So what Euan was mentioning about our custom homepage, and we really like the fact that we can kind of add our own spin onto the system. But what we've also enjoyed is communicating with the community to say, well, we've done these things, but sure, it should be something that's in Morta rather than something we create on top of Morta. And I think that's been very good. The fact that at least the system is open enough that allows us to do it, to show it to the community, to show it to Mott, to show it to the Morta team, and say, okay, we've done something here. We think it should be in the product. Do you agree? And I think that's helped us to kind of drive as well the product in direction we think it should go. And I think the way we've lived with the community overall is we're rarely alone. We're rarely asking the thing just for ourselves. And it's been a very good thing to see in the past few years that the community is active, is engaging, is talking to each other. And we see that as a very valuable thing because in an industry where we tend to not really communicate with each other, we're always kind of yeah, keeping each other's arm length, having this open space where we can just share about the product, share about how we're doing it, not doing it, I think has been very, very valuable. That's all for us. Haven't been monitoring heavily time. I think we're just slightly over. We knew it was going to happen, Euan. So thank you all for your time. Haven't monitored all the comments on LinkedIn, but if there's any question, not sure if you have time for question, Mo. If not, I'll stay on and I can answer the questions in the chat.
Unfortunately, we won't be able to do the answers here, but so it would be great if you take them because we're 10 minutes over. But honestly, that was amazing. From the beginning, I did say we will probably need the 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And you didn't even do the demo, which I actually want to say this on record. We have, obviously we're working with many amazing like organizations. Here, I think you have the benefit of also being a joint venture, but the implementation on the project is the single best project I have personally seen holistically. Like the range of things that you've built on it, your approach, the metaphor of like brick by brick, and you actually like I know you battled that like throughout and how you'd approach it. Like I think it's been absolutely amazing just seeing how you've been approaching the system. I like the fact that I would have loved for people to see the demo, but because it is actually insanely impressive when you see the project. But I also love the fact that the presentation and people hearing more about how you both think about it and the approach, because I think actually that's one of the things that's most one of the things that's most valuable here, that people just taking inspiration from the approach and your thinking. And Tomorta, not Tomorta, has to be one of the greatest films on Shakespeare I've ever heard. So biased as I may be. But no,
question
thank
we
you
ask
so much.
ourselves a lot of time. We're at that stage now where we do ask that question very often. Because the answer is not always Morta, and that's a key as well, learning experience we've had.
And it is a question we've asked ourselves a lot as well. Like, and it was one of the things that was really, really hard, like at the beginning, because you are right in that monsters could be created on the platform. And sometimes you can almost go off script with things where there are probably dedicated systems or better ways to do it. So I'm fully with you in that question. And it's a great one. It's a great way to actually put it. So really appreciate you sharing, and really appreciate the insights that you shared and your willingness to share with the community. Thank you both so much, on Thibaud and Euan, for sharing all of this with us.